My cultural moment that I am going to be responding to and analyzing and how it relates to our class is the passing of a bill signed into law this past spring by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and that took effect on July 1st, 2022. This law is known as the Parental Rights in Education and is known to the critics as the Don't Say Gay law. The purpose of this law is to prohibit classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in certain grade levels and in a specified manner. Children in kindergarten or third grade are specifically not allowed to get this instruction about sexual orientation or gender identity. However, if they are past this age, it is permitted if it is age or developmentally appropriate. This law is currently being challenged as unconstitutional by organizations such as LGBTQ+, and is being challenged because it violates the students' and families' rights to free speech, equal protection, and due process. Schools are the main entity that are responsible for making sure that this law is followed. If parents believe that schools are not following this law, they can bring up concerns with the school and file a complaint, and if not, they can sue the school. Because this is a new law, it will take some time for the public to get a general idea of how to interpret this law and for cases against this law to be resolved. However, this law cannot be enforced in a way that discriminates or harasses students based on their sexual identity or gender identity. People can still talk about their family orientation even if they are LGBTQ+, and LGBTQ+ students do not have to hide this identity. This past week, on October 18th, House Republicans in legislation introduced a bill inspired by this Florida law. This bill is called Stop the Sexualization of Children Act, and is essentially a bill to limit the federal funds that are developing, implementing, or funding sexually oriented programs or events for children under the ages of 10. This bill is a result of sexual education programs in schools for kids under 10 years old that discusses sexuality, orientation, and gender ideology at young ages. This law is unlikely to pass simply due to the Democratic House, Senate, and President. Relating these laws to class, these laws can have a major influence on a child's identity. These laws can essentially limit a child's opportunity to learn more and identify their gender identity and their sexual identity. As we have discussed in class, identities can have a big part of who we are and who we can become, and these laws would certainly limit a child's identity. However, we can compare this argument to the argument of when social media should be allowed for young children. Exposing children to social media and LGBTQ+ topics at a young age can be quite complex for them and is a topic that might be better to grasp at an older age. Additionally, as we learned in class, people who were exposed to social media at a later age still said that they felt as if they turned out just fine in life and how they were supposed to. Therefore, a child potentially having to wait to be exposed to LGBTQ+ content until later might still be able to find their correct identities later on in life. However, this is not certain. This topic also relates to the topic of gender that we have discussed in class because these laws would prohibit a child's knowledge of the complexity of gender until older ages. However, this law or not, children are still learning the differences in gender even if it is not in the classroom. Children subconsciously notice at school that boys play differently than girls take different classes than boys, such as more girls take choir, and boys and girls wear different things to school, whether they're wearing a uniform or just regular school clothes. At least this was the case in grade school for me. Banning this opportunity for gender curriculum in schools can throw kids into thinking that there are only male and female gender mindsets as solidified by these differences in boys and girls, and make it harder to relearn this mindset later on in life. The anger I feel towards these laws limiting gender and sexual identities relates to a similar anger I have towards laws limiting my Catholic identity. My Catholic identity has been limited in schools simply because there are laws in place that do not allow Catholic beliefs such as creationism into school curriculum. Catholicism and sexual orientation are two separate subjects. However, if children are not allowed to be introduced to my identity early on, should they be allowed to be introduced to other identities? Schools might just be the place where neutrality on subjects is required. Thanks for listening to my current event, and I hope you learned how it relates to college life and identity.